What are the common challenges that people face, Emma, as individuals and as corporates?
So one of the common challenges is around communication style. So some cultures prefer to communicate in a more direct manner, and others in a more indirect manner. So what I mean by that is cultures that talk in a more direct manner, they use their words to make it really clear what it is that they're communicating to you. The full story and the full picture is articulated through the words. In an indirect culture, typically there may be less words used, and it might be around the message that's being sent might be based on what's not said. It might be about reading the room. It might be about the body language that's displayed in that moment. It might be around the silence that's displayed where words are not used. And if you're from those cultures, you will receive the message that's being conveyed. But if you're not from that culture, for example, the message might not be clear to you because you don't know how to interpret those cues. And you as somebody that's perhaps from a more direct communication culture are waiting for the other party to say the words. And so once we start to recognise that there's those differences in different cultures, we might start to see what is required in order for us to have a more effective communication. So as an example, some cultures don't like to say no, especially if it's to a senior. So if you're a senior person and your subordinates never say no, how do you ever know whether something's going to happen or not? And so sometimes it's about reading the cues. So if the answer that's given is, yes, we'll see what we can do, that actually might be a no, we can't do that. So with that answer, over time, as you've managed that team, you might become more familiar with those answers and recognise that that's a no. But as you're learning about that culture and learning about that kind of indirect method of communication, you may need to ask more questions in order to determine whether the answer is a yes or a no.
The challenges that you face while communicating, do you have any personal experience?
Yes, so whilst I was a manager here in the UAE, I was looking after people that were from different cultures. And when I first started working with them, there were occasions where something would happen, and then when I would question what happened, the team would know that they knew that was what was going to happen, but they didn't want to raise that with me because I'd given them an instruction to do something in a different way. And so one of the strategies that I put in place was to give the team the authority to actually challenge me, which isn't something that's typical of their culture. But I said to them, in order for us to work effectively together, if you believe that you have some additional information that you think would help me to make a decision or would help to determine that the decision that I've made is not necessarily the best one for our team, that you would then draw, my attention to that, so that then with that new information, I'm informed, and then I can choose whether I want to stick with the decision that I've made or whether I recognise that actually that would be an inappropriate decision to make, and that I need to then take heed of your new information and make a different decision. There was another example where we'd had major rainfall and the building that we were in was actually leaking quite severely, and the senior team were in a meeting, and only when we were in a break did the staff team feel that they could approach us and say, there's a leak in the building, and and it's quite a major issue. And it turns out the leak had been happening for a while, but there'd been nobody that had wanted to actually approach the door where the meeting was happening to say there's this issue. And that's down to culture, that's down to power distance, and power distance is to do with whether there's a major hierarchical culture within a community, or whether there's whether it's a more flatter culture, and the individuals must come from a more hierarchical culture where it would be inappropriate to disturb a senior team leader meeting, and so they felt it was more appropriate to leave it 30 minutes until the break, and then notify us. In my culture, if there was, that would be considered, an emergency, and it wouldn't matter whether it was a senior meeting or not. Somebody would come and knock the door and tell us that there's an issue and that we need to be aware of it.